When I first started raising goats, it was absolutely blissful for the first couple years. And then after that, things started to get hard. In fact, things got downright heartbreaking because goats were not getting pregnant. They weren't staying pregnant. They were giving birth to babies that were too small to survive. And my adults were dying. We never had a buck live past the age of 3 for the first 5 years that we raised goats. I remember calling the vet in tears when another goat died. Eventually, we figured it out, but it was definitely not something I would wish on anybody else. We learned everything the hard way. And that's one reason I am so passionate about teaching people about good nutrition for goats. And the reality is, it's not simple. It is easy once you know what you need to do, but it's not simple because goats are not native to North America. That means we don't really have what they need to survive, which is why goats never became very popular in the United States like sheep and cows did. The Great Plains is where the buffalo roam, not where the goats roam. In fact, the things that we call mountain goats in North America are actually not even goats at all. They're part of the antelope family. If you look at their horns, you're like, oh, yeah, that does look more like an antelope than a goat. So that's just a misnomer. The reason goats are so popular now is because we're finally, just in the last 20 years, we are finally getting it figured out. But back to my story. We bought our first goats in 2002. And in 2007 is when I finally knew enough to insist on getting a mineral panel done when a goat died. And it came back showing that she was severely copper deficient. Her copper level should have been between 25 and 150, but it was only 4. Yes. 4. She was so severely copper deficient. It's amazing that she survived as long as she did. But she had left behind 2 very small and unhealthy baby goats that ultimately taught me that when you get a bad start in life nutritionally, it's an uphill battle forever. One of those goats had terrible parasite resistance and resilience for her whole life. And the other one did not get pregnant until she was 3 years old. And she actually died a year later after freshening and after having multiple bouts of mastitis. And she ultimately died. The necropsy showed that she had both pneumonia and mastitis, either of which could have killed her. I also learned about the importance of selenium and zinc in addition to copper. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that today, and how dialing in nutrition completely transformed my herd. It turned us around from a farm where we were spending way too much money on supplements that were not doing any good because we didn't know what the problem was. And so we were just throwing spaghetti at the wall, buying everything that anybody said might help, spending way too much money on vet visits, spending too much money on necropsies. I'm not saying necropsies are not a good use of your money, but you shouldn't have goats dying all the time. So today, my goats live long, healthy lives. My does live to be like 12 to 15 years old. We even had one live to be 16 and a half. Most of them never need any kind of medication their entire life. They don't need dewormers. They're just healthy between nutrition and management. Goats are incredibly healthy animals if they've got the right environment and the right nutrition. The reason that I'm making this video today is to give you some background on where I came from, because I know I've talked about this historically, like in little bits and pieces, but I want to give you the whole story in one place so that you can see why I stress the importance of nutrition so much. So my goats were getting sick, not getting pregnant, not thriving, and we didn't know why. And in fact, the first time that I mentioned to a vet, I think my goats have copper deficiency, I was actually told by 4 different vets that copper deficiency in goats was impossible. Now, this was in the early 2000s when people still thought that goats had the same nutritional needs as sheep. And sheep need almost no copper whatsoever. Sheep can get more than enough copper from just eating grass. Goats cannot. If you buy a sheep mineral, it is either going to have no copper at all in it or maybe 30 ppm, but that is the highest it's going to get because sheep are also very sensitive to copper toxicity. So too much copper is going to kill sheep. Goats, on the other hand, need to have a goat mineral that has at least 1700 ppm copper in it so that they don't become deficient. Now, I'm just going to repeat those numbers. 30 ppm or less for sheep, 1700 ppm or more for goats. That is a massive difference. And before the early 2000s, everybody thought that the nutritional needs of goats and sheep were the same, which I find really weird because they don't even have the same number of chromosomes. They're obviously very different animals. And now we know they even require like different drug dosages and things. But we've only learned that in the last 20 years. And unfortunately, nothing online ever dies. So you still keep finding old stuff. And unfortunately, some very popular people may find some of this old information and then share it on social media or YouTube or whatever and give it a rebirth when it should have been forgotten decades ago. So we also discovered the importance of selenium and zinc. Once we corrected our copper deficiency problem, our goats started getting pregnant and staying pregnant. However, it wasn't until we corrected our selenium problem that our goats started becoming much more productive. Before that, when the goats got pregnant, they would have a lot of singles and twins. We'd have a few triplets. I had one goat who had quads. That was it. Once we got everything corrected, we had goats having lots of twins and triplets. At this point, we were up to about 775 kids born on our farm in the last 23 years. And we have had more quads than I can count. Most years we have multiple sets of quads, and we've had 8 sets of quintuplets. And yes, quintuplets are 5. So that is a lot of babies that we have now. And when I add up the number of kids every year and divide it by the number of does giving birth, usually our average is 3. So in the very beginning, when I got it corrected, it immediately went up to like 2.5 kids per doe and then 2.7. And now for the last few years, we're very consistently having around 3 kids per doe. Sometimes it's a little more because one year we had 2 sets of quintuplets. So that year, the overall herd average was a little higher because of those 2 overachievers. The zinc deficiency we discovered in our bucks. I have videos and podcasts on zinc, but that's also really important. So those are the 3 big things that you need to make sure that you have good amounts in your minerals is copper, selenium, and zinc, because those are the 3 things that goats in the US are most likely to be deficient in. And we've got a lot of different videos, and I even have a free course on copper deficiency. So there's lots of other places, lots of other material that I've created where you can learn more about copper, zinc, and selenium. Another improvement that we saw in our goats after improving the copper and selenium in our does was increased milk production. Before we knew we had those problems, our goats could not even earn a single milk star. And then after we corrected our nutritional problems, those same goats who could not even earn enough to get a milk star, like that's a minimum, those same goats went on to be on the top 10 list for the one-day milk test with the American Goat Society, which is the registry that they were registered with back then. It was like a whole new herd. I have never bought another doe since 2005. So it's all the same genetics with all of those doe lines. I bring in a new buck every now and then, but all of these goats are so much healthier since correcting the nutrition. Basically, once the nutrition was dialed in, the goats were really thriving, and they continue to thrive, living 15, 16 years now, most never needing medication for their entire lives. I used to, always have vials of antibiotics on hand in case somebody surprised me and got sick all of a sudden. I quit buying those because I was throwing them away unopened after they had passed their expiration dates because we don't need them. It is such a huge contrast with our earlier struggles where we were constantly dealing with sickness and death, poor milk production, infertility, miscarriages, stillbirths, and all those things. So the biggest takeaway here is that you should never underestimate the role of nutrition in goat health. And the most common deficiencies in does are going to be copper and selenium. The most common deficiency in bucks and dry does or pet does would be zinc. And that's typically if you're feeding them alfalfa. I've got whole videos and podcast episodes on all of those nutrients so you can learn more about them. So it's really important to learn about nutrition and to be proactive about it. And unfortunately, most vets don't know much about goat nutrition. And so it's really important for you to know what your goats need in terms of nutrition and to make sure that they get it. So I don't want you to go through the same struggles that I did. Many years ago, I met a wise old holistic vet who said, I've known a lot of people go broke successfully treating sick animals. And what he meant was that if your goal is to fly by the seat of your pants until your animals get sick and call the vet, you're going to go broke doing that. Maybe your vet can save them, maybe he can't, which means you're going to lose animals, which is expensive, but also successfully treating them winds up being expensive. So it's much better to simply be proactive, get the nutrition dialed in from the beginning so that you don't have to deal with sick animals at all. To learn more, subscribe to my channel. Give me a comment below if you've had similar struggles and we can talk about it and give you links to some of the articles, podcast episodes, and videos that we've done in the past on this. And be sure to share this video with other goat owners and breeders to help them out so that they don't have to learn things the hard way either. Bye for now.